I believe women's reproductive rights should not be infringed whatsoever. No government entity should have a say in what women do with their bodies. This is why I have chosen the recent Texas anti-abortion bill as the most important issue for our state. This bill, also known as Senate Bill 8, sets a very dangerous precedent in the United States for limiting certain types of health care based solely on the religious beliefs of a conservative minority, who also happen to have the majority on the state legislature. Consequently, the line separating church and state has been blurred by a very vocal and passionate lobbying from Christian organizations who want to mandate what women can do with their bodies. According to Janice Hopkins of the British Medical Journal, this law effectively bans at least 85% of abortions in Texas, a state with a population of 29 million. Texas abortion clinics have mostly stopped providing abortions and may close. This law also opens the door to legal threats against healthcare practitioners and others. The inherent problem surrounding women's reproductive rights is rooted in the question of whether women should be able to choose whether they want to have a baby. There are nearly 50 years of precedent thanks to the legal case of Roe v. Wade, which gave women the right to have a safe abortion in 1973. Unfortunately, this has now been placed in jeopardy through the use of various legal loopholes in Senate Bill 8, which essentially deputize Texas citizens to snitch on and sue those who help anyone get an abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Surprisingly, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court of the United States have broken the long-standing tradition of abiding by precedent, which has cost women certain unalienable rights in Texas. A potential solution to this crisis is the election of government officials who will not stand for these injustices and will propose legislation that will always protect women's reproductive rights. However, electing enough officials in order to break the stranglehold of the Republican Party in Texas will be very difficult to achieve due to systemic issues such as gerrymandering and disenfranchising voters. Maureen Phipps, the chief executive officer of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, said, "Texas Senate Bill 8 is a clear attack on the practice of medicine in our country and on decades upon decades of established legal precedent. By allowing third-party lawsuits against clinicians, by virtually banning all abortions, and by curtailing the sharing of information and support related to access to vital women's health care, Texas's new law creates a very coercive environment for patients and clinicians." Many would reasonably argue that my proposed solution is currently impossible due to the political climate in Texas. The majority of the voting population is conservative, and therefore very much aligned with the anti-abortion viewpoint of the current Greg Abbott administration, which is how this anti-abortion law was ratified in the first place. Even though the idea of using political measures faces imposing challenges in Texas, change does not happen overnight. For example, it took many years for women to gain the right to have an abortion in the first place. It is very important to let your political voice be heard by speaking out against legislation and by campaigning for politicians who will not interfere with women's inherent reproductive rights. Some causes are important to fight for no matter what the current situation or immediate outlook is.